So about a week ago, I woke up in a funk. I didn't really know what was going on in my life. I mean, we were in the middle of all this COVID stuff and being separated, but this day just seemed different. It almost seemed like, Peter, your life that you knew is now changed, and welcome to this new emotional state. And so as I moved through the morning, I began to think, man, am I depressed? And so I began to combat it with the things that I knew to do. I began to drink water. I turn off the sodas, drink water. Peter, you got to go to bed early. You got to get sleep. But see, I was getting a lot of sleep. It's okay. You got to exercise. You got to really get vigorous. You got to create that serotonin in your body, whatever it may be. Finish a project. Turn off the TV. Man, you need to be more intentional about talking to your friends. And all of these things are things that I know that if I'm facing depression or I'm facing this anxiety level, that things that I need to do. And so I begin to do that, and it didn't really help too much. And so I get home that night and I talk to Teresa, and I just exposed my heart, and I'm telling her what I'm going through and what I'm feeling. I hadn't started crying yet or anything like that. But I said, I feel like I'm becoming depressed, all of this thing. She's like, well, our world's been changed. She said, what gives you joy about the job you do, about your work? What gives you joy and happiness? And I said, spending time with people, being with them, leading Bible studies, doing discipleship one-on-one, preaching, all of these things. She said, well, perhaps, the one thing that you really can do in that is you can still preach. You can do it online, or you can just write the sermon so you can be ahead of the game when all this is over. So this is where we are right now. This is my COVID experiment that I'm going to try to be here every Tuesday to put a word that hopefully you can find encouraging. But if not, just know that you're in my therapy session. And so that's what's going on here is welcome to my therapy session. And I don't know what it's going to be from week to week. Who knows? But so after I talked with her that night, we were going to watch a show, and I said, I've got to go do something. So I went upstairs. We just finished remodeling our house about 10 months ago, but there's all these odds and end projects. So I went to go finish one of them in our bedroom. So I'm there and turn on a podcast, and it's the Manly podcast. It's called The Art of Manliness. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying that's what I was listening to. And in that podcast, this man comes on. He's talking about grief. And he goes on and on and on, and I'm like, just trying to connect. And I know what grief is. It's like when someone dies or divorce or you lose your job, and this emotional state comes on you. And grief, if you spend too much time there, it can lead to somewhere else, the depression or separation. But then as he began to talk more, I began to think, it's like maybe that's the feeling that I have. Grief. I mean, everything's been taken away from me. Prior to all of this, in the middle of March, I could call my buddies and say, come over, let's have a campfire. Or, hey, let's go to Starbucks. Or, hey, you want to meet for breakfast tomorrow morning at Waffle House? That's done now. It's been taken away. I can't do that anymore. And I began to think, okay, perhaps that's what it is. And I identified that. It's like, man, I'm walking this battle. This enemy of grief is just like a cloud over me. And so the next morning I said, okay, I got to keep fighting this. I got to talk to somebody. So I wake up and I call a youth pastor friend, and he's a super smart guy. And he said, Peter, when prisoners of war or people have been put in solitary confinement, the one thing that they say that gets them through those moments is routine, severe, like strict routine to fight the monotony of being stuck by yourself. He says, I think you're experiencing detachment. And that's the idea of solitariness, is to brainwash this idea of detachment. And it totally makes sense. I'm detached from my world, although I'm like in this intense relationship with my family now, and which is great on most of the time. And so I begin, and he said, what could be missing from your life is routine. What you used to do. And I was like, man, I used to wake up early, get my kids up, fix breakfast, take them to school, come back home, do my Bible study, go to the church office, go meet. And so my routine is gone. And I realized, it's just clear as day. And so now I begin to say, okay, my problem is grief. That's what's looming over me, and that's my enemy. What am I going to do to combat this that's going to keep me from being led further down this road to depression. It's leaving me in this emotional state of blah. You see, it's always important to identify your enemies in life. You know, if you're in a battle, if you're in a battle and you know you're in a battle and the enemy knows it's in a battle, well, you've got a fair fight for the most part. But if the enemy knows you're in a battle, but you don't know you're in a battle, you're gonna get your butt kicked, right? And so I was in this battle for my emotional health, and I'd identified grief. So what am I gonna do to combat this? How am I going to get out of? And I began to study grief just a little bit and came across this man named David Kessler. I think he appeared in the podcast, and he develops he has this book called Finding Meaning: The Sixth Stage of Grief. And so the 5 stages of grief previously to him writing this book, which he studied it for years and has counseled people through death and all these different things, are anger, or denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance. And if you want to learn more about those, read the book, look the podcast up, whatever. But then the last one he addressed is meaning. And I was like, okay, well, I'm in the middle of this. So what can I learn? What can I get out of this so that grief doesn't win? So grief doesn't drag me down, because, you know, this moment, the whole world is experiencing it. It's really not grief. Just quit being a baby. Just get up and go about your day, Peter. And it's like, no, I'm an extrovert at heart. I get my batteries charged by being around people. And there's no amount of YouTube videos I could watch or Zoom conferences I could have that leave me feeling full. And so I'm in this battle for my emotional health. So in the middle of all this, for me, this grief, what can I do to grow throughout everything of this? I don't want to get so focused on all that's going on. What's the president doing? What's the governor saying? When are we going to go back to life as normal? You know, if I get so focused on that, I could possibly miss the opportunity to grow in this. Maybe, how can God use this moment to teach me a lesson? To teach me to be someone different on the backside? What can happen? And so most of all, I don't want to get so focused on this grief and what's pressing down on me that I take my eyes off of Jesus. You see, it's so easy for us to get so focused on the situations that are thrown in our front of us. And we get focused on the problem, and we don't even necessarily turn to the giver of life. I was having a conversation a couple days later with my son Fisher, and talking to him. It's like, man, how are you feeling? What's your level of depression? Are you feeling separated? You know, what's it like for you? You're separated from all of your friends. You can't see them anymore. On and on and on and on. And I came back to a verse in 1 Peter. And in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6, 7, and 8, Peter writes and he says this. He says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he will exalt you." This is the important thing for all of us to remember in this moment. If you're feeling grief, if you've got worry, if you've got anxiety pressing down on you, it says, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. He cares for you. He wants us to cast our cares and anxieties and worries on him because he cares for us. So, what is your enemy? Who is your enemy? In this moment for me, I know my enemy, and now I know my enemy's game plan is to separate me. Grief is to keep me in that situation. So what am I going to do to press back? What am I going to do to fight back against that? I have to know my enemy and my enemy's game plan so I can come back with a better game plan. And my game plan is to remember what the Bible says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 7, is that Christ is before all things, and in him all things hold together. In the midst of my grief, in the midst of the questioning about tomorrow, all things hold together. So if we remove Christ from those situations and problems in our lives, what's going to happen? Going to fall apart. We're going to fall apart. But I want to keep him in the center of my life. So until next time, man, remember that Christ holds all things together. Hope you've been encouraged.